pleased to give a report today to the Wyoming County Chamber of Commerce laying out this year's budget and the outlook for Pennsylvania's economy, which has really been struggling over the last number of years. This year our budget is a no tax increase budget, no new taxes as well, and it's funding all of our core responsibilities from education, both K-12, higher education, funding health and human services and the needs of individuals in our communities, public safety related issues, Department of Corrections, and others. One of the important things that happened this year with the budget that Pennsylvania was enabling through an increase in our revenue collection, which was 2.8% above estimates. We are now able to put money into a rainy day fund to plan for future downturns or future challenges that we faced as a state. People will be surprised to know that in the past, our rainy day fund only allowed for 6 hours of coverage of what the budget fully funds. So woefully inadequate, and we are now finally putting resources aside for that purpose.
The commissioners mentioned the issue with the voting machines the other day, and so I figured, and I incorporated that into a story. So let's start with that. Tell us about the voting machines.
Sure. So the General Assembly, the House and Senate, adopted legislation recently that would have given $90 million through a bond finance to support 60% for each county to get new machines. So a funding mechanism for the counties for new machines. And partly what prompted that is the Department of State and Governor Wolf decertified many of our current voting machines as not in compliance with the paper trail. And when they decertified them, it forced many counties to have to go look for new machines well before they anticipated doing that. His initial budget did not provide funding for it, and so the bill that the General Assembly adopted included funding along with some very important election reforms. Election reforms related to absentee ballots and an extension of time for them to be submitted to the counties. Many people, if you don't get it in by 5 o'clock on Friday before the election, you don't have your vote counted. And so this was an important reform that we believed would help with the process. The other component to the bill that was crucial was the elimination of the straight party vote. That would have allowed citizens to just go in and pick the candidates of their choice. Currently, we are one of 8 states that still permit straight party voting, and we believe that to be a good government reform so that people were voting and knowing who they were voting for and what office they were seeking. Unfortunately, the governor made a decision to veto the entire bill. And it eliminated all of the provisions in the reform measures. And just yesterday, he's announced that he's going to bond finance the $90 million from another mechanism without the General Assembly's permission.
Okay, so that means that he's trying to pay the $90 million in another way so that the counties will not have to shoulder the burden completely themselves.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So I certainly support getting the funding to the counties, but was disappointed that he didn't also recognize the importance of the other reform measures. So with this new term and this new session, it will be my 4th committee assignment, and I am now chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. First time in 33 years that a new member has taken over this assignment because of the retirement of Senator Stuart Greenleaf. Probably the first time we believe in history it's a woman and a non-lawyer to boot. So the committee has a wide range of jurisdictional issues. About 40% of all the bills in the Senate go through that committee, And so the responsibility is very significant.
Can you just touch on what some of the responsibilities are?
Sure. So the range of issues that you deal with are anything that changes a criminal statute. So if you're making modifications, which we just did, a sweeping major initiative for prevention and help for victims of crime. What are the bills that we passed? So we looked at how do we treat young people, children, in a court setting. You're currently allowed to videotape certain testimony of children. We just expanded the crimes that will now permit children to be testified in a court setting using video cameras. Previously, individuals with intellectual disability who were considered over 18 as adults had no exception. And so the new bill allows us to give someone who has intellectual disabilities the chance to testify via video camera. So many cases, an individual who has a capacity of a child, but their chronological age would have resulted in them having to come into court to testify. We increased and enhanced the rape shield protections for victims in court, and we also passed Marsy's Law, which will put on the ballot in November a question for the voters to create a parity in what I call the balancing the scales of justice between a defendant and a victim. Currently in the Constitution, a defendant has specific rights. This would now allow victims to have embedded in our Constitution important rights that create parity and create equality for them. So voters will have a chance this November to look at that very important question.
Tell me about the silica sand plant.
Sure. So a number of people have asked about the silica sand plant. I'm not aware of any application being filed at this point in time for current. But in the past, my office was asked by Wyoming County because of a settlement with the court and a requirement that they satisfy a decision by the judge to create an easement using a land transfer from the Department of Agriculture to an individual entity that had intended to build a silica plant in Wyoming County.
This was back in 2014?
So it was back in 2014. And the request, I granted that request working with Representative Sandy Major at the time because it was a request of the county and that it would eliminate a significant impact to taxpayers in Wyoming County if a settlement had been reached and the county was required to pay that out. It would have harmed taxpayers significantly. So we gave them a one-year opportunity to execute an agreement and fulfill that for this easement. That never occurred. The company that wanted to build the silica plant withdrew, and the easement expired 1 year later.